It was Christmas Eve, and the town glistened under a blanket of freshly fallen snow. The soft glow of streetlights bouncing off every icy corner. People hurried along the sidewalks, their arms loaded with shopping bags, laughter spilling into the cold night, carolers filling the streets, with melodies that seemed to wrap around the city like a warm scarf. But in a quiet little apartment on the edge of town, a deaf woman named Clara sat alone on the couch, her hands resting on her lap, staring at a small, crooked Christmas tree decorated with ornaments collected over the years. The lights twinkled faintly, reflecting off her pale, tear-streaked cheeks, but they did little to warm the emptiness that had settled inside her. The apartment smelled faintly of pine and the burnt edges of a candle she had lit earlier, but even that small comfort felt hollow tonight. Clara had always loved Christmas, but ever since she lost her parents 3 years ago, the holiday had become a sharp reminder of solitude rather than joy. She remembered how her mother used to string popcorn garlands while humming softly, her father filling the living room with laughter that seemed to echo endlessly. Now the silence of the apartment was deafening, more ironic, for someone who had been deaf from birth. The silence wasn't just literal. It was heavy with absence, with the invisible weight of the love she longed for but couldn't reach. She curled up on the couch, wrapping herself in a blanket that smelled faintly like lavender, and stared at a photograph on the mantel. It showed her as a little girl, nestled between her parents on a snowy Christmas morning, faces lit with joy and warmth. Her fingers traced the edges of the frame, and the tears came unbidden, slipping down her cheeks in steady rivulets. Clara wiped them away roughly, trying to force herself to be strong, to be the kind of person who could handle life alone. But tonight, after weeks of trying to distract herself with work, books and small tasks, she had failed. The ache in her chest was too persistent, too heavy. She wished for someone, anyone, to see her, to understand the depth of the loneliness that had built up like a storm cloud inside her. She wished for connection, but the world seemed to have moved on without her, leaving her in this fragile bubble of isolation. Meanwhile, across town, a single dad named Daniel was finishing up the final touches of his own Christmas preparations. His small daughter, Lily, barely 8 years old, was giggling uncontrollably as she attempted to hang ornaments on the Christmas tree with her little hands. Daniel had promised Lily a cozy Christmas, despite the fact that they had moved to this town only a few months ago and had yet to find any real friends. His ex-wife had made sure to take every connection they had left behind, leaving Daniel to piece together a new life from fragments. But tonight, watching Lily's innocent joy, he felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that love didn't have to vanish completely, that he could still create warmth and happiness in the coldest of winters. He hummed quietly as he adjusted the garland, a sound that made Lily laugh even more. She had noticed that he always hummed when he was thinking, and it had become their little tradition, her laughter blending with his quiet melodies. Daniel glanced at the clock and realized that it was getting late. He had promised Lily a special surprise for Christmas Eve, something that would make their first holiday in the new town unforgettable. But the truth was, he hadn't planned anything yet. Ideas swirled in his mind, half-formed and unconvincing. He wanted it to be perfect, to somehow fill the emptiness that he knew his daughter carried in her own way, the longing for a family that was complete, the sense of security that she craved after all the changes in her young life. His gaze fell on Lily's sparkling eyes, and he made a silent promise that tonight would be magical, no matter what. As Clara wiped her cheeks for the 100th time, she heard a faint knock at her door. Her heart skipped a beat. Visitors were rare, especially on a night like this. She slowly rose, each movement deliberate, and padded toward the door. Peering through the peephole, she saw a man, tall, with a kind face framed by a winter hat, holding a small child who waved energetically. Clara hesitated. The thought of strangers invading her solitude made her shrink back. But there was something about the scene that tugged at her heart. The little girl's eyes were wide with excitement, and the man's expression radiated warmth and sincerity. Tentatively, she opened the door just a crack. The man smiled gently and motioned toward the child. "Hi," he signed. His hands moved fluidly, each gesture deliberate and clear. Clara froze, her heart thumping wildly in her chest. She recognized the signs immediately, someone who knew how to communicate in the language she had always relied upon. The man's eyes were soft, patient, and understanding. He signed again. "We're neighbors. We noticed your lights. Would you like to come home with us?" Clara blinked, stunned. The offer was simple, yet it felt like a lifeline thrown across an ocean. Her mind raced. She had spent countless holidays alone, telling herself that she didn't need anyone, that she was better off by herself. But now, faced with genuine kindness, she felt the walls she had built around herself begin to crumble. She glanced at the little girl in his arms, who smiled and waved, radiating pure joy. Clara's lips trembled into the faintest smile, a glimmer of hope breaking through the sadness. Without thinking, she nodded, a silent agreement passing between them. As she stepped out into the cold night, Daniel extended his hand to guide her gently toward the small sled they had prepared, decorated with twinkling lights and a few carefully wrapped presents. The snow crunched beneath their boots, and Clara felt a strange sense of warmth. Despite the chill, Lily giggled and tugged at Daniel's hand, signing excitedly to Clara, "Merry Christmas!" Clara's heart swelled. She hadn't heard words, but the emotion in the gesture was unmistakable. She nodded, her fingers trembling slightly as she returned the sign, "Merry Christmas." The three of them walked through the quiet streets, the lights of the town glowing around them like a scene from a storybook. Clara noticed how Daniel and Lily interacted, the gentle teasing, the laughter, the small gestures of care that spoke louder than words ever could. She realized with a bittersweet ache how much she had missed that kind of connection. For years, she had navigated life quietly, observing but never fully participating, always on the outside looking in. Tonight, however, she felt herself becoming part of something larger, something alive and warm. Daniel glanced at Clara, sensing her hesitation. He signed carefully, his movements slow and deliberate. "You're welcome here, always." Clara felt tears prick her eyes again. But this time, they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of the first spark of hope she had felt in a long, long time. She nodded, unable to speak, but feeling as if she had finally been heard. As they reached Daniel's cozy apartment, the smell of freshly baked cookies and cinnamon filled the air. Lily rushed ahead, her small arms flinging open the door, and the warmth inside enveloped Clara immediately. She could see the love in every little detail, the carefully hung stockings, the glowing Christmas tree, the faint music that drifted through the room. Mixing with Lily's laughter, Clara felt a lump in her throat. She had been alone for so long, and now, in the span of a few minutes, the world had opened itself to her in a way she had never expected. Daniel watched Clara settle into the small armchair by the fire, her hands brushing over the blanket draped across it. He signed softly, "I'm glad you came." Clara met his gaze, her fingers trembling as she formed the word, "Thank you." For the first time in years, she felt seen, understood, and most importantly, connected. The room was alive with warmth, laughter, and light, a stark contrast to the cold loneliness that had once consumed her. Tonight, Christmas Eve, was no longer a reminder of loss, but a promise of new beginnings. And as Clara looked into Lily's bright, sparkling eyes, she realized that sometimes family wasn't defined by blood or past tragedies. It was defined by kindness, connection, and the courage to open one's heart when the world seemed impossibly cold. The snow fell softly outside, but inside, a fire of hope had been kindled, warming Clara's heart in ways she had almost forgotten were possible. And for the first time in years, she felt that she truly belonged.